And now it's time for In Search of Flora. This recording is to be the last in the series. The reasons are self-explanatory. I would warn you that it contains scenes that some listeners may find disturbing. Hello, Jonathan Spron here again to bring you another listener's ear view of one more unexplored area of the world as we go in search of flora. Today I'm standing in a remote area of jungle, 4 days drive and 2 days walk from the nearest airport. The locals, tribesmen of the Ngogo village, some 5 miles from here, gave us a hearty breakfast of maize, fish and some kind of meat, possibly ape or monkey. There certainly aren't any pigs or cows in these jungles. And after a challenging day travelling and searching, we find ourselves here, in a place I want to describe as attractive, pretty even. Yet there is something that holds me back. In the lush green canopies that fan out everywhere overhead, allowing only thin rays of light to cast illuminated spots on the forest floor, birds chitter and chatter, tree frogs croak in a quite foreign tongue, and the delectable Passora melosa, the honey fig tree, shares its tendril-like branches with small, and I must say quite charming chameleon-like lizards. I dare say if we had Felix Overmantel here with his intimate knowledge of the fauna of Congola, I'm sure he would have plenty to say on the subject. Despite all this beauty, I find myself somewhat unsettled, as if there could be another side to Oboto Kwai, which is, by the way, a Congolesian word meaning abattoir of hell. Any luck, Peter?
Not really.
Our current quest, and therefore the subject of this episode of In Search of Flora, the Barochi lily, is particularly fond of the climate offered amongst the fronds of a rather specialist species of sphagnum moss known as gobel moss. This, in turn, is very fond of moist, highly acid soil, such as that found at the water's edge here in Oboto Kwai. And this moist acidity comes from the waters themselves. Really, Peter, nothing?
I'm afraid not. What do you suppose that noise is?
My colleague Peter is referring, of course, to that, well, you could call it hysterical screaming. It is suddenly everywhere in the canopies overhead. I think it's monkeys, Peter. Yes, I can see them. They look quite pretty, actually. Yes, for the listeners, I should say these are quite small monkeys, slender little chaps, perhaps 3 foot in height, with almost pinkish-brown fur. Felix Overmantel, where are you when we need you? I ought to point out that Felix was due to meet us here for the programme today and simply hasn't shown up.
Jonathan?
Yes, Peter?
I'm quite uncomfortable.
Oh dear. I should also point out, of course, that I spotted some acid-loving gobel moss some 15 yards from where I stand on the banks of a tranquil stretch of water. The acidity of this water would, I am sure, be very much your cup of tea should you be gobel moss, although the banks seem to support no other types of flora as far as I can see, the acidity being hostile to many species of...
Jonathan?
Peter?
I'm experiencing a bit of a... well, I would have to describe it as a burning sensation.
Yes, right you are, Peter. Try looking for the moss a bit further along the bank. Just about there. Can you see? Peter, by the way, is currently submerged up to... Where are you currently submerged up to, Peter? Your nipples, would you say?
Armpits.
Currently submerged up to his armpits in the water, in search of our elusive quarry on the opposite bank.
Jonathan, my armpits feel hot.
Good heavens. It is more than worth a mention that the Barochi lily is imbued with some rather special properties, which are mostly responsible for our expedition here. They include...
Jonathan?
Peter.
I think I need to get out of the water now.
To the listeners, Peter.
It does, I suppose, need to be made clear for the benefit of our listeners that I'm really very uncomfortable and need to get out of the water now. Essentially, I would describe my current discomfort as very similar to being submerged in fire, so it's mainly burning, really, with some stinging and some tugging.
Perhaps, Peter, you could describe this tugging for our listeners?
I think perhaps I should do that after I get out, Jonathan, because of my discomfort.
Of course. Get out then. And so Peter leaves the waters of Oboto Kwai unsuccessful in the bid to locate the Barote lily, and with the light beginning to fade, due perhaps to the rather sudden arrival of dense overhead cloud, we may have to make camp and renew our search in the morn. Interestingly, the monkeys have, as you can hear, fallen completely silent. More interestingly, oh, I wish Felix Overmantel were here, they seem to be staring down, quite fixated, on Peter. Oh, Peter.
Yes, Jonathan, I'll explain for our listeners, shall I? I've begun to walk out of the waters. The water is now at...
Nipple height?
No, Jonathan, it's clearly not. Why do you keep mentioning my nipples?
Well,
The water now just above the base of my ribcage, it would appear that all the clothing that came in contact with the water has turned to rags, disintegrated almost entirely.
And still the monkeys watch Peter, silently, motionless, and wide-eyed. Oh, Peter.
Indeed, Jonathan.
Could you describe that?
I think it's a kind of fish, Jonathan.
Ah, a fish, yes. For our listeners, I'll describe what I'm seeing. It's a fish, quite an ugly fish, with a quite bony outer skin. It's about 1.5 feet in length.
I probably need to remove it, Jonathan.
Is that a good idea?
You see, listeners, the fish has attached itself to me.
Yes, to what you would call the abdomen area.
Yes, Jonathan, my abdomen, or perhaps stomach.
Almost exactly central to Peter's nipples, but lower down.
Its mouth is perhaps 6 or 7 inches across and seems to be fixed to my abdomen by a strong vacuum, and with the assistance of hundreds of pin-sharp teeth.
What's happened to your accent, Peter?
The most uncomfortable part of this for me, Jonathan, is when it writhes round, thrashing its tail, as it's doing now. For the listeners, I would have to say it feels a little like I would imagine it feels having a Rottweiler bury its head in your guts. Which, by the way, feels like they are being...
Extracted?
Yes, how did you guess?
Well, Peter, and listeners, the fish's belly has quadrupled in size in about 10 seconds, and it's still growing.
Jonathan, I'm beginning to feel as though a state of considerable panic might not be unwise.
Double negative, Peter. Might not be unwise. You mean might be wise.
Might be wise.
Oh, as you can hear, the monkeys are screaming again and pointing. I did not know monkeys pointed.
Yes, Jonathan, they're pointing at me.
No, Peter, they're pointing at the water.
Water?
Yes, it's bubbling. It's alive with fish.
Fish, Jonathan?
Yes.
Alive with fish, Jonathan?
Yes, Peter. Get out of the water as soon as you... Oh, Peter, your trousers, your underwear, gone. Oh, for our listeners, Peter, on attempting to walk out of the water quite naked, skin blotched with severe acid burns, has... Wow, those monkeys are screaming now, aren't they? Has fallen over because... Peter, why would you say you've fallen over?
There seem to be so many reasons, Jonathan.
But there's a big reason, isn't there, Peter? Tell the listeners about that.
Well, Jonathan, as I lay here, the canopy is above filled with screaming monkeys. I look down to see...
Perhaps cut to the chase, Peter?
Me legs have been stripped, clean of flesh, Jonathan, picked to the bone.
I have, listeners, had to avert my eyes. I would describe my condition as nauseous. What? There is something... A hand. A skeletal hand lying amongst the bushes just a few yards from that signet ring. It's... Felix. Oh my, I never told him how I felt. And now a monkey has just dropped down from the trees. It's standing in front of me. It won't let me near Felix. This one's rather big. God, that's your food, isn't it, boy? You can keep it. I don't want it. Good boy. I should say for our listeners that the monkey has just bitten off Felix's ring finger. What a sickening sound. Peter! Peter! Describe your condition. How you're just lying there now, not moving anymore. Oh, Peter. I never told you how I felt. Monkeys. So many monkeys.
One of them taking my microphone from me. I'm not your dinner. I'm a broadcaster. Listeners. Maybe I could make a swim for it.
Testing 1, 2, 3. This is Tall Monkey, reporting from my home in Oberto Quai, or as the locals call it, Abattoir of Hell. The rain is now really beginning to pour down here, a refreshing drink for many of the species, I can tell you. I mean, don't drink the water. Anyway, I prefer grape juice. As luck would have it, we also have a good supply of fresh human meat too, and this thing to talk into. It's all going rather well.
How simply blood-curdling. In Search of Flora was broadcast with the kind permission of the families of the deceased, and was written, performed, and in all other ways put together by Gary Dorking. Tall Monkey is soon to be starring in Aladdin at the Hackney Empire. For a myriad of other curious adventures, go to GaryDorking.com.